The WWE Hall of Fame class of 2020 and 2021 have finally been inducted into the Hall of Fame officially, and the show just wrapped up on Peacock, and we're here to talk about it. Very, very unconventional Hall of Fame this year. Last year, of course, we had to skip the whole thing. This year, the Hall of Fame really was a shell of its former self. I mean, it was really tough for someone who, like me, who loves the Hall of Fame ceremony so much, and this is one of my favorite nights of WrestleMania week and the festivities and everything. It's really tough to watch how this was presented. I understand it's a pandemic. Their hands were tied a little bit, but it was just a little bit, depressing at times. However, that doesn't take away from the legacy and the careers and all of the inductees tonight for both classes. I mean, there's some legendary careers here, and they did a lot, with Kane going in and Eric Bischoff and two big legacy wing inductions, and there's a lot of big names that kind of were honored tonight, but it felt a little bit emptier, a little more flat, and it just didn't have the same magic and feeling that a lot of these Hall of Fames do, as we've all seen in previous years. But they did what they could, I guess, tonight, but it definitely, if there was ever a time where human beings were missing from a show, this was it. I mean, really, it would have benefited greatly to have, people in the audience for that to react to some of the things that were being said and a lot of the funny one-liners and shit like that various inductees said tonight. It would have been nice for them to have longer speeches and a little bit more like how it used to be, but they had to do what they had to do here. And I guess the show, for what it was okay, but, there's not a whole lot of, really, a lot of meat on the bone to discuss here in terms of what was said specifically on the show. So a lot of this is going to be pretty much a casual hangout. We're going to talk about the Hall of Fame, obviously. We're going to go through each and every one of these inductions, but a lot of it is going to be just us hanging out, maybe shooting the shit, talking in the chat about our favorite memories of some of these legends, because that might be a lot more fun than doing and just rehashing what they gave us here tonight in a very, very virtual heavy, very video package heavy type of presentation tonight. We kind of knew that was going to be the deal. I was still hoping that they would have just a condensed version. I'm all for not doing it in the big arena and selling tickets and trying to, have 10,000 fans there. But, I thought they could maybe go back to how they used to do the Slammies, or maybe how they did in 2004, just, maybe a big banquet hall, but that still would cause COVID issues and stuff. So it's just not time, unfortunately. So some of these inductees tonight, I think, suffered from not having a live audience there. And if there was a live audience there, a couple of these inductions I think would have been a lot more fun, namely Eric Bischoff, even JBL, and definitely Kane at the end with some of the things that was said there. But, this show wasn't all bad. We're not going to spend the whole time shitting on it. It is WrestleMania week. I'm up here, 8 straight days in a row streaming. We are going to make the best of this and have a good time. And we're going to talk about a lot of fond memories about all of these inductees tonight, except for maybe JBL. But overall, it's just still not the Hall of Fame that it used to be. So we'll see what happens next year. Next year, seemingly everything will be back to normal with WrestleMania going to Arlington. And if we get a regular Hall of Fame like previous years, that's going to be great. Hopefully it won't be the podium deal and the setup in the ring like they did the year Bret Hart got attacked. Hopefully they'll change that up and go a little bit back to what it used to be, because it really, I really miss, this is one of my favorite nights of the year. And for the last 2 years now, I feel like I haven't really gotten it. And it's been a bummer. It's like one of the only things I look forward to in modern wrestling is a lot of these Hall of Fame nights. I like the long speeches. I don't mind that they go 60 minutes. I don't give a shit. Where am I going? I'd hate to be a wrestler with a match the next day at WrestleMania, but for the most part, I got no problem if Hillbilly Jim wants to talk for 45 minutes. I don't care. I'll listen to him. So I like this night. And it's just a shame that, it was just so production heavy, and a lot less, speech and shit like that. But anyway, we'll talk about it. I'm sure you guys will give me all your opinions on the Hall of Fame as we go through here. Let me know your show rating. We've never really rated a Hall of Fame, but how would you grade it? You got to keep in mind that at least factor into the pandemic into your opinion here, and know that they can only really do so much. But part of me wishes they would have had maybe just a small audience. I mean, if they're putting people around in the Capital One Center, and if AEW is doing it on Dynamite every week, I don't know why you couldn't at least have, some of their peers in the audience there. I don't know. Instead, they made all these people dress up in a suit and tie, set up a fake red carpet in the back of the building, and then just interview these people. That's what you had to drive to the arena for, just for that. As we talked about on Saturday, I think X-Pac revealed in his podcast that They had to be there like 7 o'clock in the morning for this shit. You mean they're there dressed up in tuxes and stuff in the morning? Ugh. No bar, no open bar. Come on, man. This should be a celebration. It sounded like it was a fucking pain in the ass. So I don't know, man. It just makes me sad. It makes me really sad because I always enjoy the Hall of Fame inductions. Even on years when we have kind of a weak class, I still find myself enjoying it. Love it. Absolutely love this night of the year. But the last three now, even the one with the Hart Foundation going in, that new setup I didn't like. Last year we didn't have one, and of course this year isn't going to be ranking as one of the best. I guess just for a fan like me, it depresses me just a little bit that, you know, we didn't get the true Hall of Fame. We'll see what happens next year and the year after that here in LA for 39. But anyway, despite all of my complaining there about how the Hall of Fame is not what it used to be, I still want to offer a big congratulations to all the inductees tonight and cheers on a marvelous career for each and every one of you. Let me crack open my Steve Austin Broken Skull IPA and toast one for all the legends that went in the 2020 and 2021 class. If you got a beverage open, join me and salute the heroes. And we will be paying them our respects tonight as best we can. And like I said, hopefully go through some memories and things like that. Rating of a 4 from Big J coming in. C+ from chat site forums. That's fair. You know, that's fair. Let me scroll up here, though, and say hello to everybody that was kind of here waiting. I know I had a super chat that rolled in earlier that I'll answer, and then we'll start going through the inductees. They basically divided it up into almost like two shows. It was a 2020 class, then 2021. So they didn't mix them all together. They actually did one year and then the other. So it was broken up twice with two separate hosts of this, Lawler doing the first and Kayla Braxton and Corey Graves doing the next. And there was even 2 Warrior Awards, which I wasn't aware of. I had no idea they were doing 2 Warrior Awards, and I was thrilled with who wound up getting the second one. So there was some good on the show, like I said, but it was interesting the way it was kind of broken down and structured a little bit. But anyway, let me just say an early hello to Victor and MWD and Melissa and Ryan and Chris Miner with the $9.99 super chat that came in before we even went live here. Thanks for that, dude. Sup, Greg, with all of the wrestler inductees in the 2 Hall of Fame classes, if they were in their prime, who would win a battle royal between them? It's hard to pick, but my pick would be Kane. Yeah, you mean of these two recent years, 20 and 21, probably Kane. Yeah, I mean, on the other side, you'd have Nash, Hall. Who the hell else went in here that would be worthy of throwing Kane out? Yeah, probably just Nash or Hall or Hogan. Yeah, I'm going Kane. I'm going with that. Bulldog, he's good at Hall of Fames too, but let's go Kane on that. Michael Cuomo, good to see you. What's up, Martin, JJ Leg, and Big J Naveed? Complexity is here with like 100 fucking comments. John Jaggers, Cerebrus Corpse is back. Ryan, Justin, Beetle 911, Ben, good to see you. Sonic Plays, Reese and Raymond. How Wheezy is here, got some monkey wrenches in the house, that's good. Kevin Lewis and Reese and Deshaun Robinson, nice. FRGN is here as well. We got a nice little crew in here for night 2 of 8 here on the channel tomorrow night, right after night 1 of Stand and Deliver. Will be up here for a review. By the way, all of the links for all of the videos for the duration of the week are on the channel now. So just go right there. I got a WrestleMania 37 week playlist set up right at the top of the channel. And you can go through there and set your reminders on everything for tomorrow. For Thursday's night 2 review of Stand and Deliver. On Friday night after SmackDown, we'll review SmackDown and we'll predict both nights of WrestleMania. Saturday, we're going to do a live watch along, live reaction to night 1 of WrestleMania. And then night 2 will be up here after the show for a full show review on both nights. So that's going to be a lot. Set your reminders. Links are all there for you. So check it out. And good to see you in here as well. Kendrick and Ben Forbes. Let me knock out another super chat from Killer Cam 0714. Thanks for the 5. With WrestleMania in Dallas next year, Undertaker has to headline. Don't say that. Undertaker is retired. He can be there. He can come out to the ring. Hopefully he won't walk. It'll take an hour and a half. But if he can get there and some lightning strikes and then boom, he's in the ring and he scares the piss out of some, chicken shit heel, some 24/7 title chaser on the roster, pisses his pants and runs away, fine, I can deal with that. But let's not have him headline and be, in the mouth, I thought you meant on the show. I get it. You mean Hall of Fame. Greg's slow. I get it. I see what you're saying. Yes, he has to headline. I think that would be a better spot for him, honestly, than here in LA at WrestleMania 39. So, Yeah, you got to think that Undertaker, if there wasn't a pandemic, you think he would have been a first balloter, right? If he's truly retired last year, he would have gone in this year. But, he's another guy where you absolutely have to have fans. If you ask me, I'm a little bummed out Kane didn't get fans because Kane's great. Kane's a great talker. I remember back in 2004 when he inducted Pete Rose, and I got a early audio, like MP3 of his speech, because back then they were taping it. They didn't air it, I don't think, on the USA Network. If they did, it was extremely condensed. But they had pre-taped that, and it was only going to be offered, I think, in the DVD of WrestleMania 20 and a standalone DVD on its own. I actually have it sitting right back there. I don't recall that ever airing on television, but I remember through the internet, somebody got an audio of Kane's speech and listening to him put in Pete Rose. He did such a good job. And that was one of the first times you would realize that Kane is actually quite fucking hilarious. And he's pretty charismatic and stuff. So hearing him there, and I think he's been out a couple of times since then, he would have had a great speech if he would have been given the ability to do it like everybody else did and have a nice, long tribute to his career, thank everybody he needs to thank, share funny stories, one-liners, jokes, everything like that the crowd can react to. Man, did we miss those audience members tonight. But yeah, I'm all for Taker next year in Tejas. Mike McGee, appreciate you. Welcome back, and thanks for 2 from you. Sad WWE doesn't care about Shad for Warrior Award. I don't think it does. I don't think it means they don't care about him. I just think that they didn't give it to him. I would have loved Shad to get it, but at the same time, Titus is very worthy. So is Rich Herring. I think that what Shad did, he died a hero, and there's no better definition of that than a warrior. And if he would have been given this award, I would have been stoked, thrilled, and felt it would have been appropriate. But I'm not going to tear them down for not doing it when they did give it to a couple of extremely deserving recipients. But the thing with Shad was so tragic that it would have been a good way, I think, to just help honor him and maybe do something a little bit to help out the family on WWE's end. So I'm all for it. It's just, I'm not going to crucify them for not picking him either. It's just weird situation, Thomas, good to see you back, man. Appreciate the $4 from you. I appreciate that we got a ceremony this year. At least they tried. This was somewhat reminiscent to me of Undertaker's 30th anniversary. It's just the pandemic fucked it, man. Fuck this COVID. I'm so over it. I'm just ready for things to be back to normal, because I feel like had the pandemic never started, 2 years before in 2018, I had my eye on that date of Survivor Series for 2020, because I'm like, that date, that Sunday 2 years from now, it doesn't fall on Thanksgiving, and it's like the third weekend in. I can't think of a better place for Survivor Series than that day. It's going to be the 30th anniversary. I've been watching it. I thought it was going to be such a big deal, maybe even an official send-off, an official retirement, very like Ric Flair WrestleMania 24 style, where The Undertaker is really sent off on such an appropriate day with so much history and all of that. I just thought it was going to be so huge, and then the pandemic started, and they tried to do something for him. It was just a lame. Like, what the hell did they bring all those legends there for? They brought all those people in, Savio Vega and God knows who else, just to come down to the ring. And that, I don't even think they came down there and then just left. That was it. There was nothing else. They had no other involvement at all. And it was just the result of a bad situation that we're in with this pandemic. And this was kind of the same thing. But I appreciate that you appreciate that they tried to give us something. And, props to all the inductees tonight who did it, and said, yeah, I'll go in on the pandemic year. No problem. So it is what it is. Hopefully this is the last of it. And next year, shit will get back to normal. That sure would be nice. And one more from Mike. Thanks for 2 more again from you, dude. Appreciate it. When do you think The Rock will get inducted? WrestleMania 40. That would be perfect. That would be the most likely, or I think maybe 39, because it's here in LA, and just basically, and basing that on, his maybe schedule, it might work best for him to do it here, but I don't know. Depends on where 40 is. Depends on really probably The Rock's schedule. Sort of busy these days with, making movies and shit. So he's very much in demand, and WWE will probably want to have him there as a major part of WrestleMania weekend, not something that he just flies in and does real quick, but actually be there for it. So it's probably just going to have to match up with his schedule, and he can do it, and he wants to do it. and all of that. Hopefully it could tie in maybe with a retirement match against Roman Reigns. That would be fabulous. And here in LA for WrestleMania 39 would be great. Otherwise, save it for 40 in Vegas or wherever the hell it's going to be. I'm into that. I am into that. All right, that catches up the Super Chats. We will start rolling into the results of the Hall of Fame tonight. Like I said, it was divided up into two sections, a class of 2020 and a class of 2021, and they knocked out 2020 first. It was still the Hall of Fame in terms of the graphics, the production music, Jerry Lawler as the host of this thing, and had that feel and the very, very well done, as always, video package they do to welcome us and go through all of the inductees and talk about the history and the legacy of the Hall of Fame, showing people like Andre and Hogan and Superstar Graham and all these, longtime legends, and Bruno and others. And so that was all very well done and everything. And then we come to the arena and we've got Jerry Lawler as the host. Apparently, Seth Rollins let Jerry Lawler borrow one of his suits. I don't recommend doing that. Seth, letting this moron borrow your suit. He does not rock it the way you do. Lawler looked like a complete lunatic wearing that, but I got a big kick out of that. So he welcomed us, and they basically just go right into the inductees. Now, it was revealed earlier this week, X-Pac was talking on his Wrestling for Life podcast and talked about the experience here of filming this and what they had to do being at the building and what time and shit like that. And he kind of clued us in that there wasn't going to be any inductors this year, which I think sucks, but it's really what they had to do. I wish having inductors there would have been better, like I said, if there would have been an audience. And even if they could have put together just a small one, just to get some natural reactions, because one of the most annoying things tonight about the whole night was the piped in fucking crowd noise. And, we knew that they were going to do this because people who have been involved in the Thunderdome they told us that they were instructed to film a bunch of reactions for the Hall of Fame. So they had to film themselves just laughing for no reason and reacting and ooh, and booing and all this shit, just so the production team can put all that together and match it up to what everybody's talking about in their speech in post. And it's just so inauthentic. And when they actually piped in one more match chance for the Bellas, I damn near shit a live aardvark right here on the floor. I just could not believe it. And then Rhea Ripley right after that went on to say that she used to watch the Bellas as a kid. You just say that with a straight face. I couldn't even fucking believe it. So, okay, we might poke a little bit of fun at the Hall of Fame too. But man, just having all that piped in generic noise, it helps. I'd rather have the piped in noise than not. I know everybody shits on the piped in noise, but trust me, it's better than what we had. There was nothing worse, nothing worse. I'd rather have piped in, noises of just dogs fucking all around, in the speakers than just doing it to no sound at all. And those empty arena shows and the complete quiet, dead, empty performance center were impossible to watch. You could hear the commentators not only in the microphone, but also through the mics that are on the cameras and shit. Like, the house mics and stuff. It was so loud. It was so bad. It was so terrible. So they built the Thunderdome, and a piped in crowd noise is not ideal. It's a Band-Aid until we can get back to regular business. But there are certain points when the crowd noise looks really bad and it sucks. And sometimes you don't even know why they bother with it. So I just kind of wish that they would have had 100 people socially distanced on the floor of the Thunderdome reacting in some way, and even maybe mic them up so you can hear them a little bit more or something, just to give you that more authentic feel. But because when you are just replaying reactions of audience members laughing, this isn't a fucking sitcom, it just comes off as real. I mean, they've got great production, don't get me wrong. WWE knows how to do all this. It's just, it doesn't come off as genuine at all. It just has this produced feel to it. And you could feel that throughout the entire night here. That was the whole kind of vibe of this thing. So we didn't have the inductors. Basically, the way these people got inducted tonight was via video package, which again, WWE's very good at. And they opened up with JBL. Jerry Lawler goes, "Let's go to the first inductee." And they play this great video package on the career of John Bradshaw Layfield, all the way from his beginning to his days in the APA and all the way up until the JBL character. And he comes out and gives a speech, pretty good speech, lots of comments about Eddie Guerrero, talked about the big night when Eddie Guerrero, I think, was it in Mexico or El Paso, when Eddie Guerrero's mom had the heart attack at the house show and everything. They just got him mega heat. just a few weeks, I think, before or after he did the fucking goose step in Germany or something. So this guy was a fucking heat magnet back then. He's such an asshole. And it cracked me up too, because at the beginning of the Hall of Fame, the two first people we saw on TV have both blocked me on Twitter, Jerry Lawler and JBL, which I found hysterical. But JBL still had a pretty good speech, and he put over Eddie Guerrero, and he talked about that program they had in 2004. I'll never forget that. I was bummed that Eddie lost the title so fast, and they didn't give him a longer run with it. And I fucking hated JBL, but Eddie and JBL were friends. They worked well together, and Eddie was a big reason why JBL got over to begin with and had the success that he had. So I said a lot of nice things about John Cena as well, which was very cool, and shouted out random people, his family, shit like that. In the end, it was kind of funny. It looked like he was going to try to acknowledge the fact that he's kind of got this reputation backstage for kind of being, son of a bitch, asshole, douchebag. You know what I mean? So he looks like he's going to kind of own up to that. And he goes, and for anybody out there that I might have rubbed the wrong way, or maybe if someone feels I spoke, disrespectfully to them, or maybe I bullied them, or whatever he said, it sounds like he's about to apologize for that. And he goes, ha, 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 get over it, snowflakes, cry me a river. That was kind of funny. Marked out a little bit for that. So JBL, he's awful. But anyway, he's now in the Hall of Fame. Congrats to him. And again, he had a couple of lines here in his speech that I think an audience would have really enjoyed his speech, because he's done a couple inductions. I remember whatever year he did for the Briscoes. I think he inducted the Briscoes. His induction for them was incredible. One of the most entertaining ones that I've ever seen or whatever. So he's got the ability to really have a good time up there. And I think the crowd was really missing from JBL's speech tonight. It would have been funny to watch people react to the shit he said. So I really wish there would have been an actual Hall of Fame audience there for that. In between all of the inductions, they go to these interview segments where they just knock out a bunch of interviews. So like I said, they set up this bullshit red carpet stuff in the back. They get all the talent there. They make them all dressed up, but they're not sitting out there. Like, that's the thing that's why I thought the talent would at least be out there for these speeches and shit, but they weren't. They were just hanging around backstage, and in between all of these inductions, you just interview a few of them, and you'd ask them about the inductors, like Rhea Ripley, and I think right after this, Rhea Ripley was interviewed with Peyton Royce, I believe, and they were talking about the Bellas and how she used to watch the Bellas as a kid, and I was like, oh my God. And then Randy Orton was interviewed after that, and the New Day was interviewed asking about the NWO. So this was kind of the theme. In between inductions, they would cut to the red carpet and and they would interview current stars about the inductors and stuff. So it was like, it was okay, but I don't know. It looked like it was just an annoying thing to take part in. The next one was good, though. This was one of the ones I was looking forward to more than anybody else last year in the 2020 class. The long overdue induction of the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. It is about fucking time, WWE. Don't know what took them so long here as well. Davey is a damn legend, one of my favorite people ever, and so many wonderful memories about him over multiple different kind of time periods in wrestling, which is why his career was so awesome, that it spanned a lot of different kind of chapters there. A lot like the wrestlers of those days did. Bret Hart was the same way. So Bulldog was up next. Very nice video package and tribute to him, of course, and accepting his Hall of Fame induction on his behalf is his family, Davey Boy Smith Jr., who's back now, apparently going to come back to work in WWE. Georgia was with him, and Diana. And as I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody that Diana still looks gorgeous. And Davey Jr. did most of the talking. Thanked everyone. Talked about he kept calling the Bulldog, or he kept calling him Davey, which is weird, instead of calling him Dad. Talked about Davey's size and, his wrestling style, and how he took a lot of that from Davey, and that helped influence him, particularly Davey's time in Japan with Dynamite and stuff, and how that really shaped him as a professional wrestler and his wrestling style. So it's gonna be cool to see him back, at some point wrestling for the WWE, I guess NXT UK or NXT or main roster or whatever. I guess he's coming back in. I hope that he does. And he talked about a lot of the classic matches of the British Bulldog, namely the match against Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1992. Arguably, or not arguably, that is definitely Davey Boy at his peak that you can get to. The pinnacle of Davey Boy Smith was that night in the main event. 80, 90,000 people there in Wembley, beats Bret Hart for the title. Unbelievable match. And at that time, that was so strange because you had the Intercontinental title like main eventing. Everything was building up to that main event, and you had like Warrior and Savage on the undercard, and it was just really strange. And that's when you knew like some of these guys were capable of being main eventers, and that match went down as one of the greatest in SummerSlam history, even though Bret has told multiple stories and interviews over the years that Davey didn't really have his shit together, and the match could have been even so much better than it was. And a little hidden gem for you younger fans out there, go find In Your House 1995 December, British Bulldog and Bret Hart from like Hershey, Pennsylvania. It's a bloodbath, fucking awesome match, even better in some ways than the SummerSlam match. So it was cool that Junior brought up specific matches like the one in SummerSlam, also brought up the match against Owen Hart that crowned the inaugural European Championship back in 97. I think they did that one overseas as well. That might have been, I think they were in Germany for that. I remember that Raw taping because it wasn't a very good one. It was real dark looking. It didn't have the big bright lights in the production, and they were overseas. It didn't look very good. But that final match, it was a tournament for the European title, and that match between Davey and Owen was fucking fantastic. It was the only good thing about that show, really, is how good that was. And he talked about Davey Boy Smith's tag team legacy as well, you know, all the way back to when they were the member of the British Bulldogs. And that's where I took notice of Davey Boy. And that's when I became such a fan of all these guys, was right around that time, around 1985, when they were coming into the WWE for the first time. Bulldogs were there, Hearts were there, and I fell in love with that program because they were always wrestling on TV, and they were always wrestling on the house shows all the time, and their matches were so good. And before either one of those teams were tag team champions, I remember watching them have matches on WWE TV that I was just blown away by. And they were doing things that up until that point, my young brain hadn't seen a lot of on TV. This was all new to see guys take bumps like this and sell like this. And their shit looked so good. And as a kid, you know, who's 10 years old at the time, I'm looking at this like, now this looks like real fighting to me, you know, where, you know, the other stuff sometimes didn't. And I could tell that even at a young age, I gravitated towards that. So the British Bulldog was a guy that I think should have been in the Hall of Fame much longer time ago and gotten inducted back then, because, you know, for me, he was like one of my favorites ever. And he had that same road that a lot of guys like Bret had, Shawn had, Perfect had, where, you know, they were, undercard, tag team, intercontinental, you know, into world heavyweight title. And unfortunately, the world title never happened for British Bulldog. I think it could have, had he had different situations, if he would have maybe stuck around and not gotten fired in 92, who knows what would have happened. Came real close to winning it in 96 when Shawn Michaels really had no challengers, and they worked a couple of pay-per-views. They did the Beware of Dog and the really good King of the Ring 96 match. If you've never seen that, check that one out too. That one is good. But other than coming close, you know, he never really got there. And even in WCW, when he went there, I thought for sure he would be champion over there, and he never really did. So he definitely probably deserved it and could have been. And dude was strong as an ox, and he was really good in the ring too. And super strong. Davey Boy Smith was awesome. And for what it was, the speech was good. I mean, Junior was dressed up in a fantastic white suit with some bling. They had a bulldog there. I think the name of the dog was on the side. I can't remember what it was. I might have said Molly. No, that's Molly Holly. I can't remember what the dog's name was, Scruffy or some shit. But anyway, bringing the bulldog out there was pretty cool. Like I said, Diana in the evening gown looked fantastic. And Georgia, his daughter, is absolutely beautiful as well. So very cool to see the family and just, you know, see some of that Hart legacy still there, inducting the British Bulldog. And again, like I'm going to say pretty much in every single induction here, this is another one that I really wish the fans could have been there for, because you would have gotten some chants and you would have had some Bulldog chants, and it would have been a much more, you know, maybe emotional moment for the family. It would have been good for the kids to see that and see how much that even, you know, 20-something years later, almost nearly 20 years to Davy's death, and about 25 since he was really relevant at all, you know, for fans to still have that much adoration for him, I think it would have been good for them to see. So it's just a shame that, you know, that wasn't one for the fans, because Davey Boy was awesome. One of the all-time best. We never got a DVD on him or a documentary, did we? Maybe it's time to do one. Might actually be a good Dark Side of the Ring episode, to be honest with you. But yeah, that was pretty good. I enjoyed that just because the British Bulldog is one of my favorites. I'd say probably my favorite time period with Bulldog was 97. Was that? I mean, I'm going to say that a lot when it comes to the Hearts, but that summer of 97, he was so funny. And when he was teaming up with Owen and kind of their dissension and then their breakup, and then when Bret turned heel and got them to come back together and become, brothers again and hug. And there was that big like 3-way hug on Raw with Bret and Owen and Davey coming together with Bret turning heel. That was all like a great moment. And he was funny too. Like we always heard about all the funny ribs that he would do. And you would see little teases of that on TV sometimes. Like when the Shockmaster fell and you can hear him going, he fucking fell on his ass or whatever. And then even in WWE, he would do these little things that you can say, okay, when I hear wrestlers tell stories about how he ribs people backstage and he's a huge prankster and jokester, it makes sense. You can see these little subtleties on TV. I remember it was like Raw in 97. It was Owen and Davey, and they were doing something with LOD and the Godwins, and there was a bucket of slop involved. And I think what it was is that's what it was. They were on the ramp on Raw, and the Godwins were by the ring apron with 2 buckets of slop. And then, and then LOD was on the other side. Owen and Davey are in the middle. So the Godwins go to slop Owen and Davey. They move out of the way, and the slop goes all over the Legion of Doom. And then they're going backstage, and Owen and Davey are watching the replay on the monitor of how they ducked out of the way of the slop, and they're begging the production guy, and Davey is like looking at the camera, he's going, please show it one more time, please. And just seeing is like the way he was doing that was so funny. And I remember I was watching it with my friends and we were just cracking up. I'm like, the British Bulldog is fucking hilarious. So he's one of the best ever. I was at least happy that he is now officially in the Hall of Fame. And like I said, it was good to see his family up there, and it was what it was. Congrats to Bulldog. More backstage stuff after that. We get Nikki Cross interviewed, and then Braun Strowman, then Drew McIntyre. They all say things, and that's all they say. After that, we would get Jushin Liger in, but let me cruise back over here to the chat and knock out any more supers that are coming in. For those of you who are hanging out in the chat right now, hit the thumbs up. Appreciate it. And decent audience in here too, which is good to see. Make sure you subscribe because we're going to be back up here tomorrow. We're going to be back up for Thursday. We're going to be back up Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Every single damn day. Buckle up. Did I get everybody? Oh, there we go. Now I've refound my place. I want to thank the Comedic Genius for 99 cents and a winky face or something, and a smiley face. Creepy looking one, but it's there. And appreciate 2 more from you, Mike McGee. Will Owen ever get inducted since Bulldog is in? The Owen question is just kind of out of everybody's hands. It's all going to be dependent upon Martha Hart. Doesn't sound like she's going to be cooperative on that at all. She hasn't really changed her tune much in the last 20 years. And it's probably not going to happen, to be honest. But it has nothing to do. It's a different debate than Benoit. It has nothing to do with it. If it's deserved, of course it's fucking deserved. But due to the circumstances, Owen can't go in. But that's life. It's a worked Hall of Fame anyway, so it's not worth getting too upset about. But it's a shame, because I'd love to see Owen go in. Bret induct him and all of that. But can't blame Martha. Michael, appreciate 5 from you too, dude. Good to see you. Do you think Bulldog would have had a longer IC title run if he didn't get fired in 92? Yes, his IC title run was nothing. I remember when he lost it, it was the Saturday night, days of Saturday night's main event were already long gone by this point, but they brought it back in like late 92, and that's where he dropped it. And I guess he was going to be getting let go, and he had to just drop the belt to Shawn literally right after he won it. And you wouldn't win the belt like that in such an epic way in front of 90,000 people or whatever it was in Wembley Stadium, and then just weeks later cough it up on TV. It was crazy. I think he would have held it. I think he would have held it until WrestleMania. Who was Intercontinental Champion at WrestleMania 93? Shawn was. Might have dropped it to Shawn. He might have kept it the whole time. Maybe dropped it at Survivor. Well, they weren't really doing one-on-ones at Survivor Series. I don't know what would have happened with him, but he definitely would have held it longer than what he did, for sure. Killer Cam 0714, thanks again for 2 more. One night only with Shawn versus Bulldog is underrated. That's a great match. So much tension. You can feel it. You can cut it with a knife. It's in the air. You can even see it on videotape, because there was a backstory there. That was right in the middle of all the turmoil going on with Shawn and Bret was, just a couple of weeks away, I think, because that was early September, I think. he was a week or so away from Vince telling him he wants out of his contract and shit. That might even happened after. Can't remember when. I can't remember if it was before or after Owen died. I really don't remember, but it was just an ugly situation, and Shawn didn't want to put over Davey Boy, and then he wound up winning instead right there in like Manchester, and the crowd was going fucking nuts, and it was it should have been Davey Boy's night. But yeah, that's an underrated match just because of the atmosphere and the way it felt and all that. It was crazy. I'd love to get Pillman in. Would love that. He should be in too. Maybe next year. Could be right. At this point, he is the only member really of the Hart Foundation that hasn't gone in, correct? Even though he wasn't a true member, he needs to be in. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the story is on Pillman not getting in yet. You got to remember there's another factor at play there as well, and that is his son. And much like Davey Boy Smith Jr., who is a wrestler and who was already previously in WWE, and they made such a big deal about him being Davey Boy Smith's son, I think one of the factors that might have led to the Bulldog taking so long to get in is because Harry wasn't available. He was working other places. He was working Japan or whatever, and wasn't coming back to WWE or had no interest. It wasn't until he kind of came back into the fold. So with Pillman Jr., he's in AEW right now, unless they did a deal because the companies seem like they could be on good terms. That could be a good example of what we talked about this past weekend when the Jericho and Broken Skull Sessions news dropped, is that maybe this could open up a door to where these two companies, they don't have to be mortal enemies. You know, you can have mutual respect. You can have communication. And we've seen that already. We saw it with TNA and WWE when Ric Flair came in to do the Hall of Fame and they let TNA borrow Christian for a night. So maybe if they wanted to put in Brian Pillman, they would bring in Junior to do the induction. The kid is a spitting goddamn image of his dad. But I don't think they're going to put Pillman in without bringing in Junior to do it. You know what I mean? So that's going to have to be something that's going to have to align as well. Otherwise, I do not want to see him thrown in one of these legacy inductions. You know what I mean? If they just get to him next, Brian Pillman. I'm like, no, fuck you. It's got to be an actual induction. So I think Junior plays a role. And a lot of things like that, little things like that, probably play a role into how these decisions are made a lot of the times and when people get in and the years that they do. Yes, Ivory, I believe, is in the Hall of Fame. After that, we had Jushin Liger going in. This was okay. You know, this would have been cooler last year or whatever, but, you know, he just wrapped up his career at Wrestle Kingdom, and I watched that whole thing, you know, that whole week of shows that they had, and I remember when it was all over, I retweeted as one of my biggest, most successful tweets, you know, 5,000 retweets or something like that, of just the 10 bell salute that they kind of had for him, the retirement ceremony in the ring, and I never seen anything like it. You know, this was just a little while before the true silence would start with the pandemic, but to hear complete dead silence, a pin drop in the arena with thousands of people there, all completely stone silent, paying respects to Jushin Liger was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen, and very cool. He's a true fucking legend. So again, this is one of those situations. There's been a handful of inductees like this that I don't want to say are head scratching, but Liger never did anything in WWF. I mean, just a couple of things, I think twice or something like that. So much like a Vern Gagne or some of these other outside people that WWE has inducted just because they are claiming the ownership of all of professional wrestling, you know, sometimes it's a little bit weird, but I'm never going to reject anything honoring Jushin Thunder Liger. So he had a very nice video acceptance speech via satellite or whatever. Very, very eerie to hear him talk about New Japan with big WWE logos behind him and shit like that, but still kind of cool and surreal all at the same time. And, you know, now he's honored in WWE's Hall of Fame and certainly fucking deserves it. But this was one that kind of went by real quick in the night. So congrats to Liger. He is officially in. Then we had one of our celebrities in. We had a couple of these. The first one here for 2020 was William Shatner. Had no idea he was planned unless they announced him last year and I forgot or whatever. But anyway, Shatner is in. He's been on Raw a couple of times. And the one that I remember, I know he's probably been on later years and more modern years or the guest host era years. But I remember him from that 95 appearance. It was like the first Raw of 95. couple weeks before the Royal Rumble, Bret had just dropped the title to Bob Backlund and was on the shelf, nursing those injuries from the Survivor Series. His first match back, I think, was that same night against Jeff Jarrett, and they did a deal where, you know, he got involved in that because Lawler was getting involved in the Jeff Jarrett match, and Lawler and Shatner had something on the King's Court earlier in the night. All that shit was kind of intertwined. That's all I really remember of William Shatner. Was never really a fan of his like kind of movie career. I watched T.J. Hooker a little bit as a kid because I remember Heather Locklear was in that. Hubba Hubba. Other than that, I never watched Star Trek, so I didn't really know about him there. And he's always seemed like he was completely batshit nuts to me. And apparently he's 90 years old. He looks more like 60. I think he's just been 60 for 30 years. And he's now in. He did a little video acceptance speech as well from his house, wearing a T-shirt. Looked like he was at his beach house somewhere, just dressed very casually, and thanked WWE for inducting him. And that was the end of that. So William Shatner is in the Hall of Fame, and I don't really give a shat. More interviews after that. Mustafa Ali, John Morrison, The Miz, MVP, and Bobby Lashley are all interviewed about the various inductees. Kind of tuned all those out, and what they said really wasn't important. And then we got our 2020 Legacy Hall of Fame wing, where they announced the inductions of the Crippler Ray Stevens. Now, Ray Stevens, I kind of thought in my head he was already in. He was a guy that I kind of assumed they would have put in back in like 94, but you know, he didn't really do a whole lot in WWE. He kind of came into the very tail end of his career there, so I guess it wouldn't have made sense for him to go in at 94. I don't know why I thought that. Just in my head, I kind of thought he was already in there. I think it's because of how much I like him. We've talked about Ray Stevens a lot on this channel before. When people ask, hey, do you have any wrestlers from the 70s or something you recommend? I always say Ray Stevens and Billy Robinson and Nick Bockwinkel were some of my favorites, but Ray Stevens specifically because I really enjoyed the way he moved around. He reminded, he was a lot like Bobby Heenan. You know, when Bobby Heenan would run away from a heel and he would do that crazy move and he could dive over the top rope, Ray Stevens could move like that, but he was also a tough wrestler at the same time. So he was one of the best. I love Ray Stevens. So he's a guy that I'm a little bit bummed out is going in this way. I kind of wish he would have had some sort of where they could have the family there doing some sort of an induction for him. Or if maybe Pat Patterson could have done that before he died, because, you know, Pat and Stevens were, pretty popular tag team there and held tag team gold together. And even Nick Bockwinkel, prior to his death, he could have been there to do the induction for Ray Stevens, because I think Ray Stevens and Bockwinkel held the titles in AWA, got at least twice, maybe more. So he was one of my absolute favorites. Brickhouse Brown, who also just passed away a couple of years ago, goes in as well. Very, very popular star in the South. We had Baron Michel Leone, kind of surprising there, but now he's somebody that I think would be perfect to go in the legacy wing. No problem there. And Gary Hart's another one that's kind of iffy. Gary Hart's another one that I would have loved to have a regular induction because he was an extremely over manager. But, you know, again, nothing really in WWE. So interesting legacy induction class there. Pretty good one. And and I left out the last one, Dr. Death Steve Williams. So again, Dr. Death, Gary Hart, and Ray Stevens for sure, I think should have gotten their own inductions. And Steve Williams, you know, he kind of had kind of a shitty end, you know, kind of just a crummy ending for him, the way all that went down, because prior to that, I mean, this guy was a stud. I mean, this guy was really well known in the NWA in the Mid-South, big, tough, badass, former football player, gone pro wrestler who could kick the shit out of everybody, goes way back with Jim Ross, good old strong, you know, corn-fed country boy, just fuck you up. Crazy, completely out of his mind, probably on a lot of drugs, and somebody that could probably just rip your head off in a bar fight. And then WWE decided to capitalize on this tough guy reputation that he had, brought him in, threw him in the Brawl for All under the assumption that he'd just go in there and kick everybody's ass, got knocked out by Bart Gunn, was never the same, went to WCW, falling out with JR, ultimately passed away, I believe, maybe around 2005. I can't remember exactly, but for somebody who was as over as he was, it sucks the way it ended for him. But he's another guy that I think, again, we talk about that potential maybe relationship between AEW and WWE, where maybe little tiny things can get done. I would have liked to have seen them give Dr. Death his own induction and have JR come in and induct him into the Hall of Fame. That would have been good for JR. JR loved him some Dr. Death. So anyway, pretty decent legacy wing this year for or legacy batch, I should say, for 2020. And then after that, we get the Bella twins. It's time for the Bellas to go into the Hall of Fame. We get a nice video package on them as well. And then they do their speech. And I mean, I don't know. They didn't, I'm going to say this right now. They did not break any barriers. They probably said that 3 different times. What barriers? What barriers are you breaking? You're 2 hot chicks. You know, got every fucking opportunity, you know, like, I don't understand, like, what barriers did you really break down? They were really the transition from the in-between, the go-between between the divas and what we see now. I'm not saying they weren't influential. They got their own damn TV show, and they definitely did some decent things on TV. I was never really a fan of Brie. And you guys know how I feel about Nikki. I was always in love with her. And then she got really good at the end. That's one thing I will give Nikki Bella credit for, is the last couple of years there, she was pretty good in the ring. And I remember her even giving Ronda Rousey that pretty decent match at Evolution. And I was like, huh, you know, I stand corrected. You know, Brie took a while to grow on me, but Nikki, she was kind of pushed as, you know, the top of the Divas division. And she was a longtime champion there before Charlotte finally, you know, ended that. But I thought she did carry it well. And when she wanted to, there's a few people like her, like Batista is like that. Hulk Hogan is like that. When they're not really the best wrestlers, but when they wanted to, they can really turn it on and they can really go when they want to go. And Nikki Bella could do that at the end. So she does get my respect for that. And I suppose that you have to give them credit for having their own TV show. It's just, you know, for a fan like me, it's hard for me to relate or enjoy any of this, because it seems like they are just trying to be Kardashians. Like somebody who's just trying to be this, you know, just famous person. You know, they got pregnant together, which is weird and creepy, and doing everything on TV. And there's so much drama, and everything is drama. Everything is drama and everything. Like, what kind of life is this to lead? I would never aspire to be a Kardashian. I don't care how many billions they have. I do not want to live a life that way, of, you know, just a complete neutral zone around your whole body where you're so oblivious to actual reality. I don't want to be that way or whatever. So like the Bellas, they're a little more down to earth than the Kardashians, but you know, the fact that that's kind of like the image that they portray is they're this Hollywood, you know, type of family. And I'm just like, that's not attractive to me. Get away from me. So they give their speech. It wasn't long, but they both said some nice things. I did enjoy Nikki's little personal thank you to John. Didn't say John Cena, just said John, because I'm sure he had a lot to do with her career and helping her out and things like that. So she thanked him and appreciated her time with him. They went on to thank a lot of the backstage road agents, producers, production staff, and talent, everybody they worked with. Shouted out Charlotte and Becky and Bailey, and a lot of the current female stars there. Talked about John Laurinaitis, who's their stepdaddy, which is pretty funny. And so all that was good, and they signed off, and that was it. But you know, they're into the Hall of Fame. We debated that when they were first announced, if it's worthy or not. I'm kind of over debating if it's worthy, because it all goes back to like Coco Beware. I'm like, look, if they'll put him in, they'll put anybody in. And that's kind of a jab at Coco. There's even probably much less worthy inductions than him. He was actually over and a good athlete. I shouldn't use him as the example, but you know, basically if you were over in any sort of way, you kind of get in. And to debate whether or not they're worthy, I suppose that if you are good enough to get noticed and get your own reality show on TV, sure, you're probably, I guess, worthy of being in the Hall of Fame, because they did help bring a new audience into WWE. Now they got the type of people who watch these shows on the E! Network. I don't know who these type of people are. That ain't me, but they exist, and there's a lot of them, and they now can have some crossover and stuff. So I'm trying to be as logical as possible here and not do everything to shit on the Bella Twins, and at least look at what they have done. But you know, when they talk about breaking barriers, it's hard for me not to laugh. Come on. What barriers? What barriers are you breaking? My God, let's not get ahead of ourselves. When you talk about breaking barriers, that accolade goes to somebody that came in the next legacy batch in 2021, Ethel Johnson. That's a true barrier breaker, not you guys. So yeah, Bellas went in there. It's enough hating on the Bellas. We shouldn't be doing that. It's all about love here on the channel tonight. After that, where'd we go? I think we got more interviews after the Bellas. We did. This time All the women are interviewed about the Bella's legacy. We hear from Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke, Naomi, Lana, and Sheamus apparently is there to talk about some stuff as well. And I didn't catch who they interviewed after Sheamus. Don't care. Then we got the Warrior Award for 2020. This was announced a few weeks back that it was going to be Titus O'Neil. He is a very, very, very worthy recipient of this because Titus does a ton of charity work, and he just really, really gives, and gives some more. His time and his energy and his devotion and all of that, and probably some of his money too. So he, with all the work that he's done, I'm glad that he was being recognized for that. They showed a great video package highlighting his youth, his athletics, his time at the University of Florida, his wrestling career, and all of his philanthropy. And he's so generous and he's so giving. And I was really thrilled with him being chosen for this, especially the fact that it kind of ties into him being the host of WrestleMania with Hulk Hogan. It works out that he can kind of go in here as well and be honored for all the fucking work that he did. Great speech by Titus as well. He was one of the highlights of the whole thing for me because, his story is pretty incredible. And I didn't know, I was not aware. He said this in a speech. I did not know he was a product of sexual assault. That's fucking crazy. I didn't know that. He's got a book out. I should read that and learn more about his story. That's one part of his life I didn't know of. Up until this point, I've only known one wrestler that's been confirmed of being conceived that way, and that's Jake the Snake Roberts. And we saw where his life took him. So props to Titus for not doing what Jake did and going in literally the opposite direction of that. And he's been, right from an early age, he seemed like he's just been a fine young human being. And he had a lot of help along the way. Mentioned in the video package and a speech, the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch, some place that he was able to hang out. He found love, he found motivation there, and he found a purpose there, and he found a drive there. He was lucky to have that because if he hadn't found that, he might have gone in a different direction. So, that really helped kind of get the ball rolling here on what kind of person he was going to be. Went on to talk about how he was the first one in his family to do a lot, include graduating from school, going to college, graduating college, shit like that. He had a lot of firsts for his family and shouted out and sent love to all of his family members and his kids that he's very proud of and he loves very much. He offers a lot of personal advice taken from his own experiences and the way that he was able to make it to where he is, given the environment that he was a product of. And you got to respect that for anybody, not just in wrestling, but anywhere. When you are born into a situation that you are just doomed to fail and you're able to get out of that, that's just hard. You're like fighting an uphill battle. Where other people in the world and, people like myself who was lucky to grow up in a home with two parents and a roof over my head, and I was fed every night and I was clothed and sent to school and, and shit like that. And I had, structure and I had parents and I had, rules and discipline and things like that. It helped. If I would have been born into a house where, it's all fucking mayhem and violence and shit going down, it's hard to break that cycle. So when Titus was able to do that and get out on the other side of that and come back and try to help out everybody else that was in similar situations that he was and try to give them the help that he got, that's what makes Titus such an awesome person. And that's why he is really, really worthy and deserving of this award. So props to Titus O'Neil. Congratulations. And looking forward to seeing him this weekend as the host, looking much more forward to seeing him than I am seeing Hulk Hogan. But anyway, let me scroll back here to the chat before we wrap it up with our final 2020 inductees, the NWO. Let me see. I got you, Michael. I got you, Killa. Who's next? Miguel Zarate. Thank you for the $5. Good to see you. I sense a AEW versus WWE storyline. I do not. I can't see them going that far. We talked all about this. I'm not going to rehash it here, but over the weekend and last night in the Raw review, we did talk a lot about how the Jericho appearance on Broken Skull Sessions at least opens the door of communication, and it kind of lets the fans know that these two companies probably don't have huge issues with each other. I kind of compared it to UFC. Vince and Dana White, they're not best friends. They're not having Christmas dinner together, but they acknowledge each other, they respect each other, and they communicate with each other. Dana White was at WrestleMania that year that Ronda was in the main event, right? He was right there in the front row or something. So there is, there can be working agreements coming together. Sometimes they can communicate and agree to do stuff together. And like I said, I would love to see Chris Jericho turn up at WrestleMania somewhere, maybe on night one, to help promote the podcast coming up on the second day of WrestleMania. Maybe even, show up in the crowd, be up in one of the owners' boxes, or just do an advertisement, or maybe even go crazy nuts and do a run-in, maybe hit Kevin Owens with a code breaker and help Sami Zayn beat him, something crazy like that. Or even better, have a ding dong hello segment, since Bayley's got nothing to do, with Chris Jericho. Something like that would be superb, but I think that's still a long shot. But we'll see. I don't know if we want to see an AEW and WWE storyline right now. I want to see what AEW can do for a little while. Let them build and grow and build that anticipation of a working agreement, because they've only been around for 2 years. At this point, it wouldn't be like if WCW and WWE came together for a supercard in the 90s. It wouldn't have the same feel, because AEW hasn't been around as long. It hasn't been a competitor for so long. Thanks for the $5, Victor Colon. How crazy is it that Jericho, an AEW star, is going to be on a WWE show, Broken Skull Sessions? I know. Hopefully you catch the podcast on Saturday. If you didn't, go check it out. We talked all about it. Yes, Christian, Pat Patterson is in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the first ones to go in. I think he went in 96. I think they did a ceremony in 94, 95, and 96, and he went in 96. If I remember correctly. Yeah, well, I mean, MWD, in terms of, he says in past years, they didn't really acknowledge wrestlers who weren't in WWE, kind of surprised that they've started to. That all started with the WCW buyout. WWE was all about themselves prior to that. They would not mention other promotions hardly at all. But once they kind of won the war, and once they started acquiring all the video libraries and the tape libraries, and they bought off the AWA footage, and of course they bought WCW, they own ECW. All of a sudden now you're starting to see a lot of these outside people like Vern Gagne come into the Hall of Fame, because WWE owns all that intellectual property. They own everything. So that's why I think you're seeing a lot of these people come into the Hall of Fame that you wouldn't necessarily see before, because WWE owns so much and so many tape libraries. There's only a couple out there that still remain unowned by WWE. So like I said earlier, that's why I think we see guys like Liger go into the Hall of Fame, is because WWE is trying to make themselves, they are professional wrestling. They're basically just staking the claim that everything that goes on in wrestling is WWE. And that's what it feels like their motivation here is. Is just smear their shit everywhere as hard as they can. Good to see you in here too, Ronnie Matthews and Royal Gaming. Hello to you. Yeah, 96 was the year Pat went in. 94 was 94 I think was like Rocky Johnson. No, not Rocky Johnson. 94 would have been like George Steele. No, he might not have been 94 either. Shit, now I can't remember. It would have been like Antonino Rocca and guys like that. Was like the 94 crew. Bobo Brazil. Ernie Ladd, probably. Shit like that was all 94. Arnold Skoland would have been another one, probably in 94. Imagine in 10 years we're watching AEW content on Peacock. Well, hopefully WWE won't even be on Peacock by then, and they will have bounced off of there and restarted their WWE network or something. Who knows? Anyway, this leaves us with the final inductee of the 2020 class. We still have all of 2021 to discuss. The NWO ran a nice little video package for the NWO. We all have tons of memories of the NWO. I could talk for 3.5 hours of the NWO because I lived all this shit as it was happening. And they were inducting Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, X-Pac, and Hulk Hogan. So X-Pac gets his second induction into the Hall of Fame. And help me out, is X-Pac going to be the first guy to go in? Who's the first guy to go in 3? Is it Flair? Did they do Evolution? Help me out here. Who's got the most so far? I feel like X-Pac and Flair can definitely have 3. X-Pac currently has 2. Flair might have 3 already. And then Hall, Nash, and Hogan, this is going to be 2 each for all of them because Nash, Hall, and Hogan have all gone in individually, and now they go in as a group in the NWO, and now we just need to get X-Pac in individually. And I fully believe that Sean Waltman deserves to go into the Hall of Fame by himself. He's definitely earned it. he was a great wrestler, and he spanned a lot of years there, and he was influential as hell. So a lot of big memories of X-Pac from a very, very important time in wrestling. So I think X-Pac easily could be a 3-time Hall of Famer whenever he goes in on his own. X-Pac does speak first, then Scott Hall, then Nash, and I think Hogan wraps things up. Nash talks a little bit about the legacy of the NWO, and he goes, hey, we might not be the Beatles, but we're at least Led Zeppelin. And that's a pretty fair analogy there. I'd consider NWO, maybe not the Beatles, but maybe Led Zeppelin. Yeah, I guess, I don't know what would, in terms of factions, what the Beatles would be. But I think that's pretty fair to say of him, because the NWO, without it, there's no telling. We've talked about this for so many years on the channel multiple times. I know I've talked about this very same point, that think about where we would be if you could trace things all the way back to Hall and Nash not leaving WWE in 1996. What if WWE had just enough money and just enough gas in the tank to offer them enough that would have kept them there and not taken the money in WCW, and they would have stayed Diesel and Kevin Nash. Therefore, you get no outsiders in NWO or in WCW. You might get an NWO, but I don't know how good it's going to be. It'd probably suck. It would probably suck just like the Dungeon of Doom sucked in WCW at that time. Because think about before Hall and Nash got there. Think about what they were doing. Hulk Hogan was being dry humped by the Yeti and the Giant. I mean, it was crazy. Randy Savage was being knocked unconscious by a high heel shoe. It was ridiculous. It was so bad, so cheesy, and so corny. You know, Eric Bischoff always likes to say the WWE likes to rewrite history. So do they. One of the things Eric Bischoff has always said in his interviews, looking back at the glory days of WCW, and he always says the same thing. He goes, when I was put in charge of WCW, I wanted to be different than WWE. How am I going to be different than WWE? Well, their storylines are very cartoony and very, very kid-friendly, and everybody kind of has a gimmick and a name. I'm not going to use character names. I'm going to use real names. You never used real names. Hulk Hogan's that's not his real name. That's not Randy Savage's real name. And everybody you had on the roster at that time, prior to the NWO coming in, were not using their real names. You tried to bring in Earthquake as Avalanche and then changed him into Shark. You brought in Beefcake as the Butcher, and then the Zodiac, and then the Man with No Name, and then the Booty Man, and then the Disciple, you know, and then the Repo Man Part 2, or whatever you made of him. And all these guys, and, you know, and Kamala was in there, and all the ridiculous characters. The Big Boss Man came in as the boss, and then the Guardian Angel. I mean, you did not use real names. That's bullshit. You had just as silly characters in WCW at that time that WWE did. You both kind of sucked. You were both lame. What changed all of this was cool dudes like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash coming in. And trust me, if they were able to use the names Razor Ramon and Diesel, they would have. The only reason they used real names is because they couldn't use their gimmick names. So Eric Bischoff acts like this was done by choice, when this was done because that's all you had. What are you going to do? Call him Oz and Vinny Vegas? That's what Nash alluded to there. He put over the WWE. He goes, hey, if we would have came into WCW in 96 as Oz and Diamond Stud, or Vinny Vegas and Diamond Stud, it wouldn't have had the impact. You know, we got over in WWE and we showed up on their TV show, and everybody was under the assumption that we were coming from there. But WCW couldn't use those names, so they had to call him Hall and Nash. And then years later, Eric Bischoff would go on to act like it was all done on purpose. Yeah, we wanted to use the real name. No, you didn't. If you could have used Diesel, you would have used Diesel. You had no choice but to use the real name, unless you did the same thing with them that you did with John Tenta or Ray Traylor. You know, and they changed their names both twice because they got sued. And I think WWE sued on the behalf of these guys too for using the accent and the Razor Ramon Chico thing and all that. So this was a game changer, no doubt. The NWO, without them, who knows what would have happened. WWE, that would have not lit the fire under WWE's ass to do anything. And plus, if Hall and Nash wouldn't have left, we never would have gotten the birth of new stars. They probably just would have continued. WWE in 95 probably would have looked very similar to WWE in 97. They would have looked like two very similar products had Hall and Nash not left. But during that time of them leaving, the whole business changed. The whole game changed. It was the Monday Night Wars were on. Both shows went live. WWE upped their production. They doubled the time of their show to 2 hours. More original, more emotional, real feeling storylines, adult-oriented storylines, building stars like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin especially got over during that time. None of that would have happened. We would have never got The Rock. The Clique might have held The Rock down. They would have said, this Rocky Maivia guy with his weird-ass hair and these silly feathers he wears out there, Vince, that'll never get over. Fire him. Get rid of him. Send him to WCW, who will do even worse with him. So, had those guys not left, in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to the wrestling business. At the time, as a WWF loyalist, I was devastated because I'm like, you're losing two of your top players in a time where WCW's already stealing all the big stars as it is. They already have the big names. Now they're taking current names. Oh, shit. It was a crazy time, and WWE really had to fight hard in 1996 after losing that star power. I've told the story before a bunch of times how I always thought that it was interesting that WWE and WCW to me around this time kind of swapped rosters. Because in 1996, the people that were in WWE were Mankind, Vader, Johnny B. Bad, Goldust, WCW stars. Pillman was there. Austin was there. All these people were in WCW 2 years prior, and they're all in WWE now as pretty major characters. Hunter Hearst Helmsley's another guy who was in WCW. In WWE, you could even technically say Undertaker, even though he had been in the company for quite some time up until that point. So it felt like the two rosters kind of swapped. Now you had the Dustins and the Johnny B. Bads and the Austins and the Pillmans in WWE, and you had the Hogans and Savages and Bossmans and Duggins in WCW. It was like this role reversal. It was a really, really, really interesting time. And Nash and Hall going over there and forming the NWO with Hogan, which was the best decision to make, was put Hogan into that. And it got the whole thing over, and it was huge, man. And they had a good run. I say it was probably solid for a year, and then probably around late 97, early 98, wheels started coming off a bit. But that first run, man, felt real. It was cool. Those Nitros were so full of excitement and energy, and that's something at the time you were not seeing in WWE. I can't tell you what a difference it was for a fan to look at WWE Raw and some of the, quite frankly, kind of just so-so television that was going on, mild audience reactions, things like that, to flip over to Nitro, to see all fucking hell breaking loose, to see the NWO in the ring, beating the shit out of a couple baby faces, spray painting them as they were being bombarded with trash from the upper decks and from the 15,000 people in the arena, all chucking their big gulps at the head of Big Sexy. And most of the time he's knocking these things down, and they're all covered in soda and beer and water, and the ring is covered in and just liquid and trash and debris, and you got carnage, and you got guys laying down knocked out, and the fans are trying to riot, security's holding them back, the guardrails are falling over. I mean, you cannot describe the energy that you would get on some of those Monday Nitros during the NWO's heyday, when they were at the top of their game, and they were getting so much heat because every single week they were just coming out there and destroying the WCW roster, and the fans were losing their shit. So that is something, those are the type of reactions that a wrestling fan wasn't used to seeing unless Bruno dropped the belt to Koloff in the fucking garden or something. I mean, it was like on the verge of breaking down. Like the whole building could have just imploded, and the fans could have been losing their shit. So it was a crazy time, and to be able to generate that type of reaction from the fans and change the business in that way to where everybody was just kind of watching wrestling in a more like kind of entertaining, fun-loving way. The days of the old gritty NWA where people really wanted to actually murder the heels with their bare hands. We hadn't seen that in wrestling in well over a decade. And now it's back. And it was, the NWO was a huge part of that. Without them, who knows if we'd even be having a WrestleMania 37 right now. WWE might have eventually gone out of business or something, or they never would have had the success that they did. And they might just still be kind of that, might actually be better for storyline purposes if they were still that small-time company, just run out of Vince's mansion and Stamford, Connecticut. But anyway, everybody got their time to speak here, and that was it. The NWO pretty much headlined the class of 2020 because Batista is going to be delayed until a future year. So that is it for 2020. Great Khali is the best Hall of Famer. We're about to talk about the Great Khali in just a second. Yeah, DX Cena is right. WCW in late 94, 95, and early 96 was extremely cartoon-like. I don't think WWE was too, but I don't know if they were really any more than WCW. So that's why I always laughed whenever Bischoff would say that. We wanted to be more real. No, you didn't. ECW wanted to be more real. Heyman is the only guy that recognized this. You and Vince were still doing the goofy shit. You and Vince were still stuck back in the times. Hall and Nash was the ones. They're just their cool factor, their hipness, their attitude is what got WCW geared towards that line of thinking. It had nothing to do with that being their battle plan all along. Eric Bischoff is full of shit, but we are going to say very nice things about Bischoff in just a second. So that is the end of 2021. End of 2020. We now go into 2021. They basically restart the show all over again. And now this time, instead of Lawler being the host, it's a dual hosting deal with Corey Graves and Caleb Braxton. So I like this. I'm glad that these two got a chance to host this instead. First inductee up was Rob Van Dam. Very cool. Really happy that he's inducted into the Hall of Fame because he is certainly a Hall of Famer. One of my all-time favorites. I loved Rob Van Dam back in the 90s when he first started getting cooking in ECW. And I saw him in WCW a couple of times and he never really impressed me. I knew he was athletic and stuff, but it wasn't until those ECW days where I'm like, wow, this dude is really fucking good. And I was watching him on pay-per-views and the matches he was having with Jerry Lynn and stuff. And everybody would say, like, this guy is ready for WWE. WWE brought him in to Raw in 97 when they were doing the ECW deal. And I thought he was going to be there, like from now on, Mr. Monday Night. That's where it all started. Beat Jeff Hardy on Raw in like 97 and then kind of falling out. They decided not to go any further with the relationship or whatever. And Rob Van Dam would not come back until ECW had folded and they did the invasion angle in 2001. But he was right at the top of my list in terms of who a smarky wrestler would like. You know, if you were to ask 1997 Greg who his favorite top 5 wrestlers are, RVD would be like up there after Bret, like for real. I loved RVD around that time. He was so good. And he remained good because he's always in really good shape. He can do all that martial arts shit and he can do the splits. And he looked, I mean, I always laughed at his name because facially, especially when he was young, he looked a lot like Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, which is why I guess he named himself that. And he could do like the splits like he could and everything. And he was so agile and he was such a good wrestler. And he hit those frog splashes like nobody's business. And they ran through all that information and history in the video package. Really well done. And then it comes out to do his speech. Rob looked good, dressed up in the suit, talks a lot about his spiritual vibrations and his individuality. I love RVD. Twice a day, he always lets us know when it's 420. He's extremely reliable for that. And he is just living his life. He cracks me up. Rob Van Dam is hilarious. And I always appreciated Rob Van Dam for just the attitude that he had. And it came through in his induction speech here, as short as it was. And everybody that he thanked, from his mom and dad to Sabu to the Sheik who helped train him, and Sabu who helped train him as well. All of his cohorts in ECW, and you know, basically talked a lot about who he was personally and how that allowed him to achieve success. How he, you know, took a lot of advice and tried to really remain an individual. And I've always appreciated that about Rob Van Dam too. We've talked about this on the podcast that, you know, when I hear stories about Rob Van Dam kind of just marching to the beat of his own drummer, I like that. I would hope that if I ever got into wrestling or if I became a wrestler when I was younger, that's the attitude I would have. I would not want to be a slave to the WWE. I would still have my principles. I would still have my morals. I would not be talked to like I was a piece of shit or talked down to or anything like that. I would not allow myself to be treated with any disrespect. That would not happen. And many wrestlers and a lot of people who are living their dream are too scared to speak up and kind of allow themselves to be walked on. And Rob Van Dam is one of those guys. And it's a very small list. There's only a few, like Jericho comes to mind, and, you know, maybe Brock and a couple of other guys that really aren't going to take any shit from anybody or are not going to allow any company, you know, to control them. CM Punk might be another good example of that as well. And RVD and in shoot interviews, we heard that one great story back in the day when they were doing the tribute to the troops in Iraq. And he was like, I'm not going. It's voluntary. I'm not going. I want to go home for 10 days. I don't agree with the war anyway. I don't think we should be going over there. Nothing against the soldiers and the people risking their lives, but I don't want to go. And it was almost as if the company and Vince couldn't comprehend that he was saying that. It was almost like they weren't listening. And Vince is like, oh, okay, you're not going, huh? Well, okay. Well, I think you're going to find when you go, it's going to be a really great experience. And he's like, did you not hear me? Like, I'm not going. It was like their brains couldn't even process that someone would tell them no. And it was like, he had to days later make it known that I am not going to go. If you have to fire me for that, fire me. I don't give a shit. I heard him say he used to go out and just sit in his car and just hang out in his car in the parking lot during the day. I mean, I would do that if you have to be there for 8 fucking hours, you know, and you're not really a social person anyway. I'd go cruise out to my car too, take a nap or something. So, you know, the fact that he doesn't play the game, the political game, you know, he just does his thing. And, you know, who knows how successful he would have been if he would have had the political type of attitude that a Shawn Michaels had, or a Hulk Hogan had, or a Nash had, or one of those it doesn't work for me, brother people. And he fought everything to the nail. If he was a little bit more like Chris Jericho, imagine the heights he could have reached, you know, but he always just kind of did his thing, and he's just going to be there, put on good matches, but, you know, kind of don't cross him type of thing. So I always appreciated Rob Van Dam's attitude. I always appreciated the fact that he would not allow WWE to have him by the balls. He would do what he's told. He'd go out there and put guys over and do business and everything like that, but he's not going to be controlled. He's not going to be a slave to these people, and he's going to have his principles and his morals and his individuality. Seemed to be a big theme in his speech here tonight, that he doesn't believe of being stripped of that stuff. And I'm in a lot of ways in agreement with that. You know, Rob Van Dam's a Southern California hippie. He's a little bit more intense than me, but I'm kind of the same mentality that I just really don't want to, I want to relieve myself of negative energy at any cost, because I think that will kill you. Stress will kill you quicker than cigarettes or obesity or anything like that. Do not stress yourself out. It is the worst. And to be able to clear your mind and be at peace and have good energy and positive vibes around you all the time, I try to live that way as best as I can. And I have a lot of that in common with RVD, but he still does tend to be a little bit out there at times. But for the most part here, his induction speech was wonderful. Good to see him go in, much deserved. And he is a true fucking legend. Got his DVD chilling in the back here as well. I mean, he's had some great matches, man. When he was at his prime, matches he had with Jerry Lynn and Jeff Hardy and Eddie Guerrero and God knows who else. Unreal, man. RVD is a stud. More interviews after that. Sasha Banks, Big E, Carmella, all of them talk about Molly Holly. So we got Molly Holly coming up next. We all love Molly Holly. This was another one, you know, she reminds me a little bit of Beth Phoenix, because Beth's induction speech was one of my favorites ever, and it wasn't one that I was expecting to be that great, and it turned out to be wonderful. And I think Molly's could have been the same if we would have had a fan presence here, like real humans in the building. Would have been nice. Still a nice video package showing us all the great memories of Molly Holly. I remember all the way back as Miss Madness in WCW, and she was one of the Madness girls or the Macho girls or whatever back then. And then she came into WWE and they did the Mighty Molly stuff, and they were showing highlights of all of that. She was so fun loving, all the stuff that she did with Crash Holly and the Hurricane. And oh man, Molly was great. And then when she went heel and decided to be a little bit more serious, and you know, we talked about her. I did a review a few months back of the Divas Undressed show that they did in 2002. Was that it? 2002 or 2003? And she was a big part of that as well, boycotting the whole event and, you know, refusing to show herself and demean herself in that way. Molly's always been great. The wonderful story of her paying for Beth Phoenix's wrestling school was also pretty awesome. She is a wonderful person. She is way, way, way too good for the wrestling business. The wrestling business has no business having Molly Holly a part of it, because it sucks and she doesn't. So it was great to see her come out. Very nice little speech. She had something a little bit wrong, though. She came out and said that her and Vince McMahon are the only two people in WrestleMania history to have their head shaved. Not true. Adrian Adonis at WrestleMania 3, that whole match turned Brutus Beefcake babyface, turned him into the Barber. That's where the Brutus the Barber Beefcake was born, was in that match. But they had a heck of a time cutting the greasy, sweaty-ass hair off of Adrian Adonis's head, so really he didn't get that bald. Molly and Vince were much more bald than him, so maybe that disqualifies Adrian, and that's why she didn't shout him out. So we'll give Molly Holly a pass on that, because she's Molly Holly, and she can do whatever she wants. Congratulations, Molly. We love you, and much deserved Hall of Fame induction for her. Great Khali was up next. This one cracked me up. When they announced Great Khali for this, the timing of it was perfect. Let me ask you guys this. What do you think would have happened with this. If Big Show would not have gone to AEW and Big Show re-signed with the WWE, do you think they'd be putting the Great Khali in this year? I don't. I think when Big Show went to AEW, this is a rib on Big Show. It's not mean-spirited or anything like that. There's no heat. Big Show even said himself that Vince McMahon called him and wished him luck on his future and shit like that. I think this was a rib. Big Show and Khali, of course, you know, they were the two big men in the WWE. They even had that backstage fight. I'm not sure if they ever really got over their heat with each other. I think it's squashed, but still, when Big Show talks about him, he doesn't sound like Khali is like his favorite person in the world. So part of me thinks that they're putting in Khali now. Not that Khali doesn't deserve to go in. I just think the timing of it coming in now is a rib on the Big Show to put Great Khali in before him, just to give Khali some more bragging rights. I got in the Hall of Fame before you did. Might be kind of funny. So Big Show will come back to WWE one day and go into the Hall of Fame, I'm sure. But I think putting Khali in now might have been just a little bit of a way to needle Big Show on his way to AEW. I just can't help but think that. Pretty fun video package on the Great Khali. This is another guy, you know, talking about breaking barriers. I mean, this was a global star. He was a global draw. And, you know, and a big deal for the country of India and all that stuff. So the amount of eyeballs that he brought in internationally was definitely something that you can't discredit. And he was a very huge guy. He is a former world heavyweight champion. So again, if you've got Hillbilly Jim and Coco Beware in the Hall of Fame, why can't a 7 foot tall, 400-pound former world champion be in the Hall of Fame too? So I'm not going to question whether or not he's worthy. He is. And his video speech was actually pretty good. He looks good with the gray. Getting a little older now. He's got a little gray facial hair there. I thought he looked very good. Couldn't understand anything he fucking said, but he looked very good. And I hope that whatever health Great Khali is in, it's good. Because big guys like that, you know, makes you worry for their long-term health. So whatever's going on with him, I hope he's in the best health possible, and he's happy and he's healthy and he's looking good. So congratulations to the Great Khali. We poke fun at the Great Khali, but at the end of the day, we love Great Khali. What's his name? Rajan Singh or whatever was interviewed backstage as well, talking about the Great Khali. So congrats to him. Ozzy goes in next. I liked this one. I liked Ozzy Osbourne going in because he goes way back. I remember that from WrestleMania 2, man. He was there in the corner of the British Bulldogs when they beat the Dream Team for the tag team titles. That was great. Made multiple appearances after that in years to come on WWE as well. A lot of the footage they showed in the video package, I didn't remember. I knew that he was around because back in the MTV, when he had that the Osbournes were on MTV, I'm pretty sure that was around the same time that WWE was running Sunday Night Heat on MTV. So I know there was some sort of, you know, cross there where Ozzy had come in to Raw at some point and performed a concert that one time, but then he was also on Raw in later years too, like in the late 2010s, or in the late 2000s, I should say, and maybe even a little bit after that. So he's made several appearances in WWE, plus Ozzy's awesome, so I got no problem with him going into the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame. He's got just as much business being there as anybody, if not more so. There's some people there like Drew Carey that I'm like, yeah, he was in the Rumble, but come on, Hall of Fame. I think Ozzy did more. So congrats to him. I remember when I lived down in Wilmington, in North Carolina, where they film a lot of movies and stuff, when that show was popular, the son, what was the son's name? Jack? I think it was Jack. The son came down to do something, and he was in the bar next door. And they're like, oh, Jack Osbourne's next door having drinks. And they had he had two big, beefy security guys with him, and they'd basically take the, you know, like the VIP ropes you would see like at a nice nightclub or something. They basically rope him off, and he's sitting like at a table by himself, mind you. And they basically roped him off just to kind of have drinks himself. Eventually, a couple people came to join him, but he was like there all by himself, and he was sectioned off from the rest of the club. It was quite the scene. I'm like, God, look at this guy there all by himself. Oh, don't nobody come near me. Nobody wants your autograph, Jack. I always remember that about Jack Osbourne. But anyway, pointless story. At the end of the day, Ozzy's in the WWE Hall of Fame now. He deserves it. Now we get another batch of legacy inductees for 2021. Pretty good amount, a pretty good little batch here as well, including Dick the Bruiser, Pez Whatley. I have so many memories of Pez Whatley as a kid. Glad to see him go in there. Buzz Sawyer, who's completely fucking nuts. I guess he's a good guy to go in the legacy wing, considering his limited and no WWE runs at all there. Ethel Johnson, the first African-American women's wrestler that came around, I guess, the late 50s, is finally going in. She only passed away. I don't remember when she passed away, but I remember hearing about it. It's got to be within the last 5 years, maybe even like 3, when she passed. So she is definitely somebody that should have been maybe put in one of these legacies a while back, earlier than this, but she's in now. That's great. And Paul Bosch, legendary Houston promoter, who's got a lot of ties, of course, to Bruce Pritchard and a lot of the big names in WWE. And WWE did a tribute show to him, years ago, back in the 80s when they were in Houston. And putting him in just as a legendary promoter is worthy. So pretty good batch of both legacy inductees this time. Of course, with all of these, you can make the case for a few of them that they should have had their own standalone inductions. But I guess we got to take what we can get in this WWE world. After that, we get Eric Bischoff. I was looking forward to this one because I like Eric Bischoff now. What was funny about this is that after his speech, they had interviewed, might have been before, I forgot, but they interviewed Kevin Owens. And what he said about Bischoff was basically 100% the same way I always felt about Bischoff in my life. Kevin Owens and I both had very similar feelings towards Eric Bischoff. In the war between WWE and WCW, we were firmly on the side of WWE, both of us. I couldn't stand WCW. As a matter of fact, I think on the show tonight, Kevin Owens said, "I hated WCW," end quote. And I kind of did too at the time. Even though I would order some of their pay-per-views, I did like what the NWO was doing. I was really team WWF, and I could not stand Eric Bischoff and anything he was doing over there, and he was such a fucking prick, and I wanted him dead. But then that all changed. Then it all changed when Bischoff came into WWE, and he was the GM there, and he did a wonderful job, and he was always, very honest and open and owning up to all of his, previous maybe mistakes and faults in interviews, and talked very openly about WCW and his time there and his strategy and his attitude towards WWE during that time. And he grew on me. The more I saw Bischoff on TV, the more I heard from him, and the more I heard out of his mouth, I was like, I can see, he did some pretty shitty things back in the day, but really, it wasn't any worse than what Vince did in the 80s when he was going around going national, swallowing up all these other promotions and just being ruthless and cutthroat and fuck you and your families. It's my game now. So I can't really be offended when somebody comes around and tries to do that to him. What goes around comes around. It's this theme on this goddamn channel. So I made my peace with Bischoff. Talked to him a little bit on the Jericho Cruise last year as well. Super nice guy, super chill. His podcast with Conrad is very entertaining. And Bischoff truly does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. He's another guy that I think could have been put in a long time ago, just based on his accomplishments and everything that he did in WCW. He is the only person to push WWE to the brink of extinction. He almost did it. He had him. Like just one or two more punches would have done him in. They were on the ropes. They were on a fucking knee, man. Just one more good overhand right death blow would have done it. And they had that opportunity. I think Bret Hart could have been that death blow, but they fucked it up. So they had a chance. They were so close. So for that alone, he deserves, some credit, saying, wow, he got a whole bunch of eyeballs who are used to watching WWE and only WWE to now recognize, oh, look at all this, what's going on over here. I like this now. Oh, the hell with these weird, wacky garbage men and school teachers. I want to watch the NWO. So, he deserves a lot of credit for what he accomplished and all the ideas he had. And even though he wasn't, WCW wasn't the most well-structured company from internally, from a wrestling booking sense, with all the craziness and the just the mess that was going on behind the scenes and how disorganized it all was, they had the money to bring in enough stars there that had, a lot of good matches and a lot of good promos and a lot of good nitros. And they built Goldberg out of that and, had a heck of a run. So Bischoff is one of the main reasons why all of that success was able to happen. And he was pretty much the brainchild of the NWO. He took a germ of an idea from Japan and turned it into the biggest American wrestling angle that we've really ever seen to this day. So for that alone, Bischoff deserves to go in the Hall of Fame, much, much deserved. And they ran his video package. He came out there to do his speech, and probably my favorite point of the night. Mostly, you know, during these Hall of Fames, I get a little, you know, I get a little emotional. I get a little choked up and teary eyed during some of these in most years, but it was really hard to kind of feel that emotion in this Hall of Fame until, you know, Bischoff comes out and he goes, you know, they told me that I only have 3 minutes to give my Hall of Fame induction speech. Wait a minute. Did I just say 3 minutes? And he kind of just looked up in the heavens or whatever. Loved that. Loved that. Heartwarming tribute to 3 Minute Warning. That was cool. And then went on just, you know, to talk about his career and, you know, the success of WCW and the NWO and coming and working for Vince and his whole entire, you know, career path, especially, you know, how crazy as it was for him to make the transition, for him to be in charge of WCW, being just a hair away from not only putting WWE out of business, but then years later, when WWE was kicking their ass, he had a chance to buy WCW and it fell through at the last minute. So things could have been different. And the fact that he did something that 2 years prior would have not, my wrestling brain wouldn't have been able to comprehend. Eric Bischoff came in, I guess, in the summer of 2002, right, to run Raw. If that very same segment would have happened 2 years prior in the summer of 2000, my head would have exploded. Would not even have seemed fathomable or possible at all for Bischoff to be on WWE TV around that time. Would have blown my mind. So a lot changed in that time, and he came in, and like I said earlier, he really grew on me. And he talked a lot about that, about the different parts of his career, from being, you know, an announcer in the AWA to, you know, executive producer in WCW to a talent in WWE. He's been everywhere. He's seen everywhere. He's seen everything, and he's worked pretty much the top stars in the business. And when we look back, I mean, in 50 years, whoever's talking about wrestling and what it's like and what it looks like today, people are always going to remember Eric Bischoff's name as being a game changer. You know, we can write him down right now as one of the true game changers. People that fucking changed everything. Bischoff is on that list, along with Vince, along with Hogan, along with Stone Cold. There's a lot of game-changing names out there that without these people, we could be looking at a completely different product. And Eric Bischoff is on that list. So, you know, you can make a case for him to even be a headliner in a Hall of Fame. Like, no shit. But here was good. We got his little 3-minute speech, and that was that. Then we got the Warrior Award. After that, we got this one I really liked for the 2021 Warrior Award, because I didn't know we were getting to. I had never heard this. If this was announced, the story somehow missed me. And when they started going through, like Kayla and Corey say, all right, it's time to give out the next Warrior Award, and they start going to the video package, I'm like, who is it? I had no idea who it was going to be. So I'm watching this completely blind, and then they announce it's going to be Rich Herring. And now Rich Herring is a name I've heard a bunch of times, but never really knew much about him. All I knew of him was that he was a lifelong WWE employee. His name came up about a year ago in something. I forgot what we were talking about. So, and I remember mentioning, I'm like, he's been there a while, but not even sure what he fucking does or whatever. So I knew he was there a long time, but to see him get this award, I think was so appropriate, because if you remember way back during the Ultimate Warrior's speech, right, the night before he died at WrestleMania 30, he said that he would like to see an award created for all of the men and women who worked so hard behind the scenes, the production crew, you know, the seamstresses, the cameramen, and the ring crew, and everybody that just busts their balls. These are nameless, faceless people that you will never know or see. That is the reason why this ship is sailing the way it is. And Warrior wanted there to be an award to honor these people, and they never did. Now, granted, the Warrior Award has been great ever since the beginning with Connor going in and some of the other, that kid they had, that little kid they had like a year or two ago. He's fucking hilarious. And of course, Titus O'Neil for the 2020 class. A lot of the Warrior Awards have been wonderful, but they haven't been what the Ultimate Warrior initially intended this award to be for. So it finally feels like for the first time, this was given out. Now, a couple of years ago, they did Susan, what was her name? I forgot. But so that kind of counts as well. But this guy has been a 51-year employee or something like that with WWE. He's very close with the McMahons. He's very close. I mean, everybody's gone now. I mean, think about who this guy knew. This guy probably had close personal relationships with Jim Ross, Howard Finkel, Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, all the managers back in the day, any of Pat Patterson, any front office people, Linda, Vince, Vince's kids. He probably watched them be born and grow up. You know, he was probably there when Shane was born, for fuck's sake. So, or at least when Shane was extremely, extremely young. So this is a guy that I think, based on what we saw in the video package and the tribute to him and the nice speech that he gave, I thought this was a really appropriate Warrior Award. And it was nice to kind of go see it go to somebody, go to a recipient that it was originally intended for. You know what I mean? So congrats to Rich Herring. That was all a really nice piece there on him. Happy for him. That brings us to our headliner for 2021. Kane is the headliner this year. Of course he is. And like I said at the beginning here, he's another guy that I really wish would have been doing this in front of an audience, because Kane is very entertaining. Kane can give and deliver a very meaningful and emotional speech. And I know he can get a lot of laughs and reactions from the audience. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to get that here, but he still had a lot of great things to say. So of course, we got the wonderful video package for Kane. You know, I think they referred to him as Glenn Jacobs a lot as well. And, you know, to all the different, parts of his career, all the way back to Isaac Yankem and shit. And I was aware of him prior to that, because I was pretty aware of like Smoky Mountain and USWA wrestling back in the day in the 90s. I would read the magazines and see pictures of all these guys, and I knew who Unabomb was. And that show that he referenced in his speech tonight about Undertaker going there and working with him, I remember that match. It's on video. So this was an induction speech that I was really looking forward to. Kane thanked a lot of people, because early on in his career, especially in Memphis and stuff, you know, some of the people he worked with, like Dutch Mantell, Jim Cornette, Jim Ross, he shouted out all these people, including all of the backstage employees, the production staff, the talent relations people that are so busy with the day-to-day workings and, you know, the management of this talent in WWE. He really put over them. And somebody who's, you know, a mayor now and has a more administrative role, somebody like him in a job that he has now, it probably gives him even a more appreciation and deeper appreciation and understanding for what a lot of the staff in WWE goes through on a daily basis. So he was very sure to thank them, and he made a point to thank everybody there. Went on to thank his kayfabe daddy and his kayfabe brother, Paul Bearer, and The Undertaker. And he said something that's very true. He said The Undertaker and Kane is the greatest wrestling story ever told. And it is, because it has spanned a lot of chapters, you know, and a lot of betrayals and a lot of reconciliations and a lot of other betrayals. And there's been murders involved here and arson and all sorts of shit. I mean, it is the craziest story. You know, if you were to write all this down and give it to a complete stranger who knows nothing about wrestling to read, they'd be like, what the hell am I looking at here? So it is quite the saga between these two. One of my big regrets is that Undertaker was not here to induct Kane into the Hall of Fame. It's another reason why I wish maybe Kane would have gone in 2 years from now, just so he could have people there and Mark Calloway could induct him, because that's what needs to happen. But I'm willing to accept this. It's still a very good speech here by Glenn. And he went on to say a lot of the same things that Titus did. Not the same things, but, you know, kind of in the same ballpark there, in terms of being able to build yourself up from nothing. You know, Kane said, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm just a farm boy from Missouri. And look at what I was able to accomplish. I was able to stumble through life and find success. And I believe that if I'm able to do that, anybody is. And I can understand that. So that's good advice, to never give up, and don't give up your dreams, because even if you think you don't have what it takes, you just might have what it takes. I can relate to that in my own life, you know, too, just what I've done in, you know, restaurants and stuff like that, and being able to support myself and the money I've made, just being able to just work hard, you know, where, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I didn't think I'd be at this point. So it's good advice. And Kane made a lot of his career, especially when he had a couple of failed gimmicks there early on coming into WWE. You know, if he wouldn't have knocked it out of the park with Kane here, I don't know what they would have done. If this would have been a 6-month gimmick, the way The Undertaker was originally brought in was to probably be their 6 months job to Hogan. What if Kane only lasted 6 months and lost it at WrestleMania 14, and they scrapped the gimmick after that, and that was it? He might have been off WCW after that. Who knows what would have become of him? So Kane is one of my favorite wrestlers in WWE history, just due to his size, how awesome he was, the gimmick, the music, and what a good wrestler he was. Kane is extremely good for a big guy. Him and The Undertaker, honestly, are the two best big men wrestlers there has ever been. Guys that look like them. You know, when you think of Spivey, you think of Nash, you think of Sid, you think of, you know, fucking Giant Gonzalez, any of the big, tall people, they can't work most of them. I mean, Nash and Sid are passable, but neither of them are even close to as good as The Undertaker or Kane. They were both fantastic. And then there's the more heavy set guys that are in the class of their own, the Bam Bam Bigelows, the Vaders, guys like that. But in terms of like the big, 6'8", 6'10", 7-foot giants out there, Taker and Kane, they are miles ahead of the rest. Nash and Sid can do some things, but neither one of them can do anything that Taker and Kane can do. And WWE had them under their umbrella the whole time during everything. And it showed. Kane was the best. He had some amazing performances. The Royal Rumble 2001 comes to mind. I loved the chain match, the Intercontinental title match he had with Triple H. I think that was like Judgment Day 01. It was the night before Triple H tore his quad in the tag match on Raw. Like, that match was really good. Now, I always liked the various attire and wardrobe changes Kane would go throughout the years, changing his look up a little bit. I always loved the music and the pyro and everything he did there. And then he went a different direction in 2003 when they finally unmasked him. At the time, it was very controversial, very debatable if they should have even done that. But in the end, he got over without a mask as well, got himself a horror movie deal out of it, and he starred in a movie. So he was able to, really adapt and go from a guy that was, completely unknown, working as Unabomb, to coming in being an evil dentist and one of the worst gimmicks ever, and then going into one of the second worst gimmicks ever, trying to recreate a past gimmick played by another person in New Diesel, and then them scrapping that, then going into Kane and not talking, and then using the voice thing, and then starting to talk again, and then realizing that he does have feelings and can have girlfriends and can develop friendships and get betrayed in those relationships by X-Pac, by Tori, by various people. He can be a sympathetic babyface. He can be a killer, shitting your pants heel when he comes for you. He's got so many dimensions to him, and he can be just a scary horror movie villain hooking up Shane's nuts to a car battery. And he can also be fun and hug it out with Daniel Bryan. This guy literally can do it all. I think the only time I was really, really annoyed with the Kane character is when he was Staples manager Kane, and he was coming out as corporate Kane wearing the slacks and shit. Like, that drove me nuts. But everything else that Glenn Jacobs has done, really, I've always been impressed with. Even when he was Isaac Yankem, I didn't mind seeing Isaac Yankem matches on Raw. Him and Undertaker worked on Raw one time. You knew he was good. You knew he was big and bad and could kick ass, and all he needed was the right gimmick, and he found it. He worked with a mask 2 different times in his career, without a mask for a lot of his career, put the mask back on at one point, did all sorts of stuff, and he has truly got one hell of a long-looking career there. If you just look at it as a whole in his entire body of work, he's done a lot, and he's seen and been everywhere. So congratulations to Kane. There's not many more people floating around out there who are more deserving than him. If you think about it, I mean, he's really top of the list. I mean, at this point, you got Taker out there, you got Rock floating around, and Owen, of course, who will probably never go in, and of course Pillman. But who out there is really more worthy of Kane? Nobody. If somebody in the chat said Kane was my favorite wrestler of all time, I would respect you, because that's a very good pick. And that's one that most fans don't say. Even during the Attitude Era, everybody was Austin or Rock, the occasional Triple H, the occasional Taker, but nobody really said Kane during that time. And, they should have, because Kane was physically the best, one of the best out there. Just a beast from a physical standpoint. But anyway, that is, and that's a wrap. That is your WWE Hall of Fame 2020 and 2021 in a nutshell. Like I said, it was a shell of the Hall of Fame's former self. I wish we could have gotten more out of this than we did, especially with fans and things like that. But what can you do? It's COVID. You got to take what you can get. And I think under the circumstances, this Hall of Fame was acceptable. The big pros, the pros of this Hall of Fame was, I'd say, the Bulldog stuff, the Titus O'Neil Warrior Award was great. RVD, Eric Bischoff, and Kane, and the Warrior Award for Rich Herring were all of my bright spots here. Some of the negatives were the fact that I just didn't care much about the Bellas going in, and I don't believe that they really broke down barriers. I think that's ridiculous. And of course, no fans being there, it being a more virtual experience. I would have at least liked them to try to have people there, but they didn't want to. All those wrestlers showed up there dressed up. I wish they could have been sitting and socially distanced out there. Even if you tape this, you can, people can get up and go to the bathroom and do whatever they want. You can tape it, you can edit it, you can figure it out. I kind of just think, having some reactions would have helped. But then again, they're in Tropicana Field, and if you do a small group of people to react to what's being said, you might not even be able to hear it very well anyway, since you're in such a loud arena and the acoustics and all that. Who knows? Maybe it just wouldn't have worked, but I wish they would have tried a little harder to make this feel a little bit more unique than just doing an entire Hall of Fame speech on the Thunderdome stage on Raw and SmackDown. Just wish they would have done a little bit more, but they didn't. And this is what we got. That's life, right? All right, just about 2 hours right on the dot of this live stream talking about these two. I'll go over here and cruise over and answer some chat questions, hang out for a couple of minutes, and then I'll probably cruise out of here because I'll be back tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow's going to be rough because we've got night one of TakeOver. I'm going to try to at least eyeball AEW. Try to see. I'm not going to be reviewing the show in full, but tomorrow during the review for TakeOver, we'll at least talk about what went down on Dynamite. Yeah, I agree. Russo was a big part of WCW's downfall as well. A lot of things were. Booker T is in twice. That's right. Thank you. Brett has 2. Michaels has 2. Booker has 2. Flair has 2. Okay, thank you for that. I wasn't sure if Flair was in 3. I thought Flair might have gone in. I guess they didn't do Evolution then? Why did I think they did Evolution? Are we sure they didn't do Evolution? Because that would put in Flair by himself and with the Horsemen and Evolution. Maybe they didn't do Evolution. I don't know why I thought they did. Yeah, I guess they probably didn't, but they did DX, but not Evolution. So yeah, when Evolution goes in, Flair could be a 3-timer. Ironically, Hogan's never going to do more than 2 because he can't go in as anything other than Hogan and NWO. But there are some people that could go in as 3. Brett being one of those as well, because Brett could go in as the Hart Foundation faction as well if they ever wanted to do that. Might be a good way to kind of get Owen in the back door there. The Booty Man. Of course, the Booty Man. It's his real name. You can't make that up. Jim Cornette or Vince Russo, who's more Hall of Fame material? Come on, Mike. I know I'm not the biggest Jim Cornette fan because of some of the language he uses and how fucking crazy it is, but he is a million times more worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. I don't think Vince Russo belongs in the Hall of Fame at all. I ain't going to lie. I do not think he contributed as much as he thinks he did. And even though he was a big part of the Attitude Era, there was a lot of writers backstage that were a part of that. If Russo goes in, then maybe other ones like Brian Gewirtz or Carano or other guys should go in too. I think that Cornette actually has a career in wrestling. He was a manager, even been in the ring a couple of times. He was a manager in multiple promotions. He ran his own promotion. He was a promoter. He's done it all. He's a historian. Jim Cornette, that's not even a debate at all. Vince Russo, I don't believe deserves to go in the Hall of Fame at all. Jim Cornette, I believe, not only deserves to go in the Hall of Fame, but should have been in years ago because he's that legendary of a manager. When it comes to managers, he is, aside from just Bobby and a couple other guys, man, it's, Cornette is up there on that list of the biggest ones ever. So we'll see if he ever does go in to the Hall of Fame. He was there a couple of years ago, right? Putting in the Midnight. Or no, the Freebirds. Who did he put in? I forgot who he put in. Oh, Rock and Roll Express. He put in. Yeah, giving away the results was very underhanded. It was. But you got to wonder if the shoe was on the other foot, do you think WWE would have done that? I mean, Vince was ruthless. He would step on any throats that he needed to. So I don't know if he would really be above that. He might have just not thought of it. But Bischoff was smart. He'd get those results, and he just blurred them out on TV. Tatanka will be in the Hall of Fame one day. Maybe. He did have that. Remember when he came back? I thought I was imagining that. I remember it was like just this past year or something. I was like, was Tatanka back? Like, why do I envision him on Raw wrestling for a year? I think he came back and worked in 2005 or something. I'd totally forgotten about that. But based on his undefeated streak when he came in, he didn't get beat for a year. It was crazy. He even beat Shawn when he was Intercontinental Champion on TV in a non-title match. So they were putting Tatanka over hard. Oh my God, I forgot about Hogan going in as Mr. America. I suppose he could. Maybe he could go in as Mr. America and go in for a third time. That would be fucking hilarious. I don't know how else Hogan goes in 3. What else was he a part of that would make him worthy of going in a third time? The only factions he was a part of was the NWO, right? How would he go in other than by himself in the NWO? I can't think of a third option there. He's not going to go in as a tag team or anything. No way. Stephen Taylor, good morning, wherever you are. It's 10 p.m. at night for me, but good morning to you. Eat your Wheaties and be back tonight because we're going to be reviewing TakeOver. Comedic Genius, what TakeOver and Mania match are you looking forward to seeing? Probably on TakeOver. Night 2 is looking real good. I think Cole and O'Reilly will steal the show there on Night 2. On Night 1, I guess probably EO and Raquel, because I want to see Raquel get over. But yeah, I think that's all that's there for potential. What's the other one, right? The other 2 big ones are on Night 2. Yeah, so I'd say Cole and O'Reilly is the most of all of them. I'm interested. I'm very, very interested in Cross and Balor, but in terms of the match that I know is just going to be off the hook, it's going to be Cole and O'Reilly. I'm looking forward to that one a lot. And then on WrestleMania, I don't know. Since Victor Colon here mentioned Mega Powers, I can't help but think about Kevin Owens' WrestleMania 5 themed T-shirt that he wore on SmackDown with him and Sami Zayn exploding at WrestleMania. So I might say that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn might just surprise us. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Mega Powers tag team. Maybe. He could go in. They could go in. Maybe Hogan, Savage, and Elizabeth together. Yeah, I mean, they were together a year, I suppose, but they didn't team a ton. They were only friends. So it's not like they were tag team title contenders, because now if the Mega Powers would have been around in the Attitude Era, then most definitely they would have won the tag team titles, because that's what they would have done. They probably would have done the deal where Savage won the Intercontinental title and Hogan won the World title, and then the 2 of them together won the tag titles. That's what they would have done, just like they did with Austin and Triple H. But you didn't book TV that way back then. It's not the way you did anything. So they never really, they had some tag team matches, a couple of big ones. They wrestled on as a team at Survivor Series and SummerSlam, and then the big breakup on the main event on NBC. So yeah, I suppose the Mega Powers could go into the Hall of Fame. I can't say no. It's the Mega Powers. One of my favorite memories of wrestling ever was watching their birth on Saturday night's main event right before I was moving down to North Carolina from Michigan. It was one of the very last things I watched in the state of Michigan before moving down to North Carolina. That Saturday night's main event with Honky and Randy for the Intercontinental title, and then Honky hits him with a guitar. Elizabeth brings out Hogan. Hogan and Savage had not been on good terms prior to then, and Hogan saves him, and they do this handshake and everything. It was so fucking awesome. One of my favorite. That's still to this day my favorite Saturday night's main event of all time. Whatever the date on that was fantastic in the fall of 1987. Still have the original copy. Recorded it on VHS, and back then in the 80s, VHS tapes were still even kind of a newer technology, so they were like heavier. If you pick up a VHS tape now, before they kind of went out of style, they were quite light. But I remember the one that I taped that Saturday night's main event on was like had metal in it. It was super heavy, and so was the VCR. It was like this fucking big, man, I'll tell you. And that's what I recorded that show on. The Mega Powers were awesome. Oh yeah, Ciampa and Walter is going to be good. I just hope Ciampa lives. Because I love me some Walter, man. Love me some Walter. SmackDown on 05 was when Tatanka turned up. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right. Cerebrus Course and Stephen Taylor and AJ Daniels and everybody else that's hanging out with me in here tonight. I want to appreciate you being here. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here because we got more streaming to do, and I'm kind of hungry. I got to eat some food. So we've been up here for the past couple of hours talking about the Hall of Fame. It was fun. It was what it was. And now the real pain begins, Danny boy. The real fun begins tomorrow, kicking off night 1 with TakeOver, and then it's going to be all wrestling all the time. So get ready for a whole lot of wrestling. TakeOver tomorrow, night 1, TakeOver Thursday, night 2. Reviews on both will be up here after Friday Night SmackDown to review that SmackDown, find out who won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal and the tag team titles, and we'll predict the entire WrestleMania show. Saturday on night 1, we're going to do a watch-along, a live reaction. All of these links, by the way, are up on the channel right now, so please go over there and set your reminders. Give them all a like, and make sure you subscribe to me. We'll be up here watching night 1 together on Saturday, and then night 2, I'll wait until after the show, and we'll come up and do a big review on both nights. So that is what's on tap. Like I said, the links are up. Go find them and go save them. You guys have a great rest of your night. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it a lot. And once again, congrats to all the inductees to this year's WWE Hall of Fame for the class of 2020 and 2021. You guys have a good rest of your night and be back here tomorrow for more action with TakeOver. Y'all be good.